I never imagined that a simple dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant would change my life forever. When those wealthy women poured red wine over my head, laughing at my cheap dress, they had no idea who my husband really was. What happened next shocked everyone. Hi, I'm Maya Collins, and I'm just an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. Or at least, I thought I was. I wake up every morning in my small apartment, make coffee in my secondhand kitchen, and put on clothes I bought from discount stores. I've never owned anything designer, never stepped foot in a five-star restaurant, and certainly never imagined I'd become the center of a story that would shake the foundations of this city's elite circle. You see, I believe that people like me, quiet, simple, working-class people, just live our lives in the background while the wealthy and powerful move in their own glittering world, completely separate from ours. I thought the two worlds never really collided, that there were invisible lines that kept us apart. I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. What I'm about to tell you happened just 3 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. It's a story about power, about cruelty, and about the most satisfying revenge I've ever witnessed. It's about how appearances can be deceiving and how the quietest person in the room might just be the most dangerous one. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about power and revenge. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. And by the time I'm done, you'll understand why I can never look at wealthy people the same way again. I've been working at the downtown public library for 8 years now. It's not glamorous work. I spend my days helping people find books, organizing shelves, and running reading programs for kids. My salary barely covers rent and groceries. But I love what I do. There's something peaceful about being surrounded by thousands of stories, helping people discover new worlds through books. It was actually at the library where I met Julian 2 years ago. He came in every Tuesday afternoon, always requesting business journals and financial newspapers. He was quiet and polite, wearing simple jeans and plain button-down shirts that looked like they came from the same discount stores where I shopped. His shoes were worn, his watch was basic, and he drove an old Honda that had seen better days. What drew me to him wasn't his appearance, it was his kindness. He always said please and thank you, never raised his voice, and had this gentle way of speaking that made me feel calm. When he finally asked me out for coffee, I was surprised but delighted. Here was a man who seemed to understand what it meant to live simply, to appreciate small pleasures. Our relationship grew slowly and beautifully. Julian told me he worked as a business consultant, helping small companies with their finances. He was often vague about the details, saying his work was boring and he preferred talking about books, movies, or my day at the library. I found his humility refreshing in a world where everyone seemed desperate to impress others with their achievements. When he proposed after a year of dating, it was with a simple ring he said he'd saved up for months to buy. Our wedding was small, just us, 2 witnesses, and a judge at the courthouse. Julian insisted he preferred intimate ceremonies, that big weddings were wasteful and stressful. I agreed completely. We moved into my small 1-bedroom apartment because, as Julian put it, why pay for more space than we needed? Even after we married, Julian maintained his mysterious schedule. He'd leave early in the morning with his worn briefcase, return home by 6 with groceries or takeout, and spend evenings reading or watching documentaries with me. He never talked about specific clients or projects, always brushing off my questions with gentle kisses and subject changes. I assumed he was just modest about his work, maybe even a little embarrassed that his consulting business wasn't more successful. Looking back now, there were signs I should have noticed. The way he always paid for everything in cash, how he never seemed worried about money despite our modest lifestyle, the expensive-looking documents I sometimes glimpsed in his briefcase before he quickly closed it. But I was so happy with our quiet life together that I never pushed for answers. I thought I had married a wonderfully humble, simple man who loved me for exactly who I was. Our first wedding anniversary was approaching, and Julian surprised me by making reservations at Lernerton, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I'd only heard about it in magazines, the kind of place where a single meal costs more than I make in a week. I was nervous telling Julian we couldn't afford it, but he just smiled and said he'd been saving up for something special. I spent hours getting ready, choosing my only black dress, a simple one I'd bought for job interviews years ago. I paired it with my grandmother's pearl earrings and the flats I wore to our wedding. Looking in the mirror, I felt pretty but also painfully aware that I didn't belong in a place like Lernerton. The restaurant was everything I'd imagined and more. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and the silverware alone probably cost more than my monthly rent. Julian looked handsome in his only suit, though I noticed it was getting a bit worn at the edges. We were seated at a corner table, and I tried to relax and enjoy this incredible gift my husband had given me. That's when I saw them. 3 women at a table across the room, dripping in diamonds and designer clothes that probably cost more than my car. They were beautiful in that polished, expensive way that comes from having money your entire life. I caught them looking at us, whispering among themselves, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. Bianca, the blonde one with the enormous diamond necklace, was the first to approach our table. She walked over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to disaster. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sweet but condescending, "but I just had to come over and tell you how brave you are for dining here tonight." Her friends, Elena and Madeline, followed behind her, their expressions amused and cruel. I didn't understand what she meant at first. Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he remained calm. "I'm sorry. Do we know you?" he asked politely. Bianca laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh no, we don't know each other. I just noticed your outfit," she said, gesturing at my dress, "and I thought it was so courageous of you to wear something so vintage to a place like this." The insults came fast after that. Elena commented on my shoes, saying she hadn't seen anything like them since she was in high school. Madeline pointed out that my purse was clearly a knockoff, though I'd bought it thinking it was just a regular handbag. Each word felt like a slap, and I could feel other diners turning to watch the show. But the worst was yet to come. Bianca picked up her glass of red wine, an expensive bottle that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, and held it above my head. "Let me help you with that dry look," she said, and before I could react, she poured the entire glass over my hair. The wine was cold and shocking, running down my face and staining my dress. The restaurant fell completely silent, except for the sound of liquid hitting the floor. I sat there frozen in humiliation while these 3 women laughed like they'd just witnessed the funniest thing in the world. I expected Julian to be as mortified as I was, to maybe call for the manager or simply leave in embarrassment. Instead, something changed in his entire demeanor. The gentle, quiet man I'd married seemed to disappear, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. His voice, when he spoke, was different, lower, more controlled, but carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "I think you should apologize to my wife," he said, standing slowly from his chair. Bianca scoffed. "Apologize? For what?" "For pointing out that she doesn't belong here." Julian pulled out his phone, not the basic model he usually carried, but something sleek and expensive I'd never seen before. He made a call, speaking in a voice so quiet I couldn't hear the words. But somehow, every person in that restaurant seemed to lean in to listen. "Yes, this is Julian," he said into the phone. "I'm at Lernerton. I need you to pull the files on the Langford family, the Blake Beauty Empire, and the Greenwich Charity Foundation." Immediately, the color drained from Bianca's face. Elena grabbed her arm, whispering urgently. Madeline took a step backward, her eyes wide with what looked like recognition. "Who are you?" Bianca whispered, but Julian was already ending his call. The restaurant manager appeared at our table as if summoned by magic, his face pale and apologetic. "Mr. Cross," he said, and I almost didn't recognize the name as belonging to my husband. "I am so deeply sorry. This is completely unacceptable." Julian's transformation was complete now. The man who worried about spending money on nice dinners was gone, replaced by someone who commanded respect with just his presence. "We'll be leaving now," he said calmly. "Send the bill to my office." As we walked out, I heard Bianca frantically making phone calls, her voice shrill with panic, but I was too stunned to process what had just happened. My husband, my quiet, humble Julian, had just made three of the most powerful women in the city look terrified with a single phone call. The car ride home was silent except for the sound of my own thoughts racing. Julian drove us to our apartment building, parked his old Honda, and sat for a moment with his hands on the steering wheel. When he finally looked at me, wine still dripping from my hair, his eyes were filled with a mixture of love and something that looked almost like fear. "Maya Collins," he said softly, "there are things about me that I haven't told you, things I should have told you before we got married." I waited, my heart pounding, while he seemed to struggle with where to begin. Finally, he took a deep breath and said the words that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. "My name isn't Julian Cross." Well, it is, but it's not the whole truth. I'm Julian Cross, the CEO of Cross Industries. We own 40% of the real estate in this city, including the building where Leonardin is located. My company controls the largest investment fund on the East Coast, and we have holdings in almost every major business in the state. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "That's impossible," I whispered. "We live in a tiny apartment. You drive a Honda. You wear clothes from discount stores." Julian smiled sadly. "Because that's who I want to be with you, Maya Collins. I've been wealthy my entire life. I was born into money, raised in mansions, sent to private schools where kids like those women tonight were my classmates. I've seen what that world does to people, how it makes them cruel and empty and incapable of real love." He reached over and gently touched my wine-streaked cheek. "When I met you at the library, you treated me like I was just another person. You didn't want anything from me except my company. You never asked about my car or my clothes or what I could buy you. You just loved me for who I was when I was with you." The pieces were falling into place now, the mysterious consulting job, the expensive documents, the way he never seemed worried about money. "So when you said you were saving up for my ring, I bought it from a street vendor because I wanted to propose to you the way a normal man would. I wanted our love to be real, not based on what my money could provide." He laughed bitterly. "I've been living a double life for 2 years, going to board meetings and charity galas during the day, then coming home to our small apartment and pretending to be someone I'm not. I should have been angry. I should have felt betrayed. Instead, I felt overwhelmed by the realization that this man had given up his entire world just to experience authentic love with me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was terrified you'd change. Everyone changes when they find out about the money. They start wanting things, expecting things, becoming someone different. I couldn't bear the thought of losing the woman I fell in love with. Over the next few weeks, I watched my husband orchestrate the most calculated revenge I'd ever witnessed. He didn't do it with violence or public confrontation. Instead, he used something far more devastating: his power and influence in the business world. Bianca Langford's husband owned a chain of luxury car dealerships. Within a week of our anniversary dinner, 3 of his biggest suppliers had mysteriously canceled their contracts. His bank called in a loan that had been secured for years. The prime location where he'd been planning to open his flagship store was suddenly no longer available. Bianca went from planning their European vacation to watching their family business crumble. Elena Blake had built her beauty empire on exclusive partnerships with high-end hotels and spas. One by one, those partnerships dissolved. Her products were removed from shelves, her contracts terminated for vague reasons related to changing business needs. The boutique where she sold her luxury skincare line lost its lease when the building was suddenly sold to new owners who had different plans for the space. Madeline's situation was perhaps the most poetic. She ran a charity foundation that depended on donations from wealthy families and corporations. When her major sponsors began withdrawing their support, citing budget cuts and shifting priorities, she was forced to lay off staff and cancel the gala that was supposed to be her biggest fundraiser of the year. None of it could be traced back to Julian directly. He never made threats or demands. He simply used his network of business relationships, his influence with banks and suppliers, and his ownership of various properties to create a web of consequences that tightened around these women like a noose. The beautiful part was watching them realize what was happening. Bianca was the first to figure it out. She called the restaurant, demanding to know who Julian really was. When she learned the truth, she tried to contact him directly, but his assistant politely informed her that Mr. Cross wasn't available for meetings. Elena and Madeline soon followed, each making desperate phone calls and sending emails that went unanswered. They began reaching out to mutual acquaintances, trying to find someone who could arrange a meeting, an apology, anything to stop the systematic destruction of their lives. 2 months after the wine incident, Julian received a call from Bianca's attorney. She wanted to meet to apologize, to make things right. After consulting with me, Julian agreed to see all 3 women at his office, an office I'd never seen before, located on the top floor of the tallest building in the city. I insisted on being there. After all, I was the one who'd been humiliated, and I wanted to see how this story would end. The office was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, expensive art on the walls, and furniture that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. When Bianca, Elena, and Madeline were escorted in by Julian's assistant, they looked like shadows of their former selves. Gone were their designer clothes and perfect makeup. Bianca's hair was disheveled, her eyes red from crying. Elena clutched a cheap handbag, her usual confidence replaced by desperation. Madeline looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Please," Bianca said before anyone else could speak. "We're sorry. We're so sorry. We didn't know who you were. We never meant for things to go this far." Julian sat behind his massive desk, his presence commanding the room in a way I'd never seen before. "You're sorry you didn't know who I was," he said calmly. "But you're not sorry for what you did to my wife." Elena stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "We are sorry. We're sorry for everything. Please, you have to understand. We weren't thinking. We were just being stupid and cruel, and we know that now. You poured wine on an innocent woman's head because you thought she was beneath you." Julian continued. "You humiliated her in front of a room full of people because you believed your money made you better than she was." Madeline was sobbing now. "Please, my foundation helps children. Innocent children who don't deserve to suffer because of what I did. I'll do anything to make this right." I watched these 3 women, who had seemed so powerful and untouchable that night at the restaurant, reduced to begging for mercy. Part of me felt satisfied seeing them experience the same humiliation they'd inflicted on me, but part of me also felt something I hadn't expected: pity. "The truth is," Julian said, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, "what you did to my wife revealed exactly who you are as people. You judge others based on their appearance, their clothes, their perceived social status. You think money gives you the right to treat people cruelly." He stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of them. "My wife is worth more than all 3 of you combined, not because of what she owns, but because of who she is. She's kind, genuine, and treats everyone with respect, regardless of their circumstances." Bianca fell to her knees, actually begging now. "Please, we'll do anything. We'll apologize publicly. We'll donate money. We'll never bother you again. Just please stop this." Julian looked at me then, and I realized the decision was mine to make. These women had hurt me, humiliated me, made me feel small and worthless. But watching them now, broken and desperate, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. "I want them to understand," I said quietly, "what it feels like to be judged by people who think they're better than you." Julian nodded and turned back to the 3 women. "You will each make a public apology, not just to my wife, but to everyone you've ever treated poorly because of their appearance or social status. You will donate half of your remaining assets to charities that help working-class families. And you will never, ever treat another person the way you treated my wife." The women nodded frantically, agreeing to everything. As they left the office, still crying and thanking us for our mercy, I felt a strange mixture of justice and sadness. Over the following weeks, I watched as each woman fulfilled her promise. Bianca's apology was published in the society pages of the city's major newspaper. Elena started a scholarship fund for women trying to start their own businesses. Madeline's foundation began focusing specifically on helping children from low-income families. But the real change was in how I saw the world. I learned that appearances truly can be deceiving, not just about my husband, but about everyone. I'd also learned that power without compassion is meaningless, and that true strength comes from choosing mercy when you could choose revenge. He gradually introduced me to his business world, but always on my terms, always with the understanding that our love was built on who we were together, not what we owned. Looking back on that night at Lernerton, I realized it was a turning point in my life, not because of what those women did to me, but because of what I learned about myself and my husband. I learned that love isn't about sharing everything immediately. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most. Julian had kept his wealth secret, not to deceive me, but to preserve something precious between us. I also learned that real power isn't about having money or influence. It's about choosing how to use whatever power you have. Those three women had social power, and they used it to hurt someone they saw as vulnerable. Julian had financial power, and he used it to defend someone he loved. The wine that night stained my dress, but it also revealed the truth about everyone in that room. It showed the cruelty of people who judge others by their appearance, the quiet strength of a man who would do anything to protect his wife, and the resilience of a woman who learned she was stronger than she ever imagined. If this story taught you anything about not judging people by their appearance, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about respect and karma. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, you never know who you're really dealing with. So treat everyone with kindness, because the quiet person sitting next to you might just be the most powerful person in the room.